Hello, everybody. Welcome to the podcast. I know it has been like ages since I last recorded the podcast, but a Ramadan vibe. There is basically so much slacking. You get lazy to do stuff, and you're tired, out of energy all the time. So yeah, really, really tough time to record a podcast. But yeah, today, I thought maybe I should talk about my process of writing short stories. Not like I wrote a lot, but of the short stories I wrote, I think now I have an idea. Writing is very important. So it is a very, very useful thing to pick up writing. So if you want to push your English to the next level, writing is the way to go. Writing is going to help you a lot. Use those words that you accumulate through reading, through listening. You can use all of those words and expressions in writing. There are two ways to use the expressions and words that you learn throughout the day, either by speaking, basically talking to people. But if you can't talk to people, you can write, you can talk to fictional characters. So, very interesting. Writing, again, a very, very useful thing to pick up, especially as a language learner. And you'll start to see that every time you're like learning a new thing, and you're like expanding your imagination palace every time you get more creative. Every time you have more ideas. Maybe the first time you write a short story, it's going to be very difficult because maybe you're not used to it. But as you go on, as you write, it's gonna start to be easy. And not only easy, you start to love writing, right? So every time you have an idea, since you can't share it with somebody, you can just maybe turn that into a short story. And I just want to stress out that short stories are very, very important and are like a very good way to start, especially for me as a teacher, because I can assign short stories to my students. And hence, you don't get bored because if you assign them books or novels or novellas, students tend to not read a lot. And most of the students that I have, at least, already have jobs. If you have a job, you don't have a lot of free time to read a book or read a novel. So short story is like that sweet spot, for reading. You can allot about 30 or 40 minutes of your time a week or 2 weeks, and you can read a short story with a good plot, and you learn a lot of words as well, right? So it's a good way to start for you also as language learners, because a short story usually it's in between like 1 page to 30 pages. So you can write as many as pages as you want, and you can still call it a short story. Whereas a book usually tends to be longer, right? So so again, if you're starting, that's what you should start with. A short story usually starts again a page. I've read a 1 page short story, and it is called a short story. It is called a short story because of the plot, right? It has a plot. There is conflict. There is everything that you could see or you could have in a novel or or a book, right? So now my process. How do I do it? Usually ideas are good ideas, at least, are really, really rare to find. Most of the time, you find something very interesting if you get an idea. Let's say I have an idea about a short story to write, right? The important thing to do is to write that idea down. If you want to write a short story, you just write it down. Okay, go to your notebook and write that idea down. Okay, this is an idea of a short story. You just write it down. You don't need to be detailed about it. Okay, very important. So once you write that idea down, later on you might come back. If you have time, you can develop that idea. To develop that idea is to give it sequencing. Okay, we have let's say today I woke up and woke up with a very good idea. All right, a short story about someone who dreams of going to Mars, right? Yeah, that's his dream, right? And maybe he's very poor, so it's unlikely that he's gonna achieve that. So I need first to write the idea. This is the main idea of the story, and then I will write the plot. The plot is like the structure that holds the story together, sequencing. How do events progress in a short story, right? So you have rise in action, fall in action, the conflict, you have a resolution, right? These are again the way short stories tend to be sequenced. It is a sometimes it is illogic to it. Sometimes events go from a certain way, for example, the beginning to the end. Sometimes it is a switch, sometimes from the end to the beginning. Sometimes you start with the climax. For example, if you're watching a movie, um, the short story could start with maybe the main character dying. They're gonna give you a hint or um, give you like a scene where the main character died, and they are gonna say 10 years ago, right? And that's how they start, right? So they start with the basically the end of the short story, and they move back. Do start with the very very beginning, right? So again, plots are different. They're not always one way. So you can basically do the plot in a way you see fit, in a way you find it interesting. You can write a plot that way. Anyway, sequencing, very important. To sequence your short story, you need to write sentences. For example, let's go back to the idea of the guy who dreams to go to Mars. We need to have um, to give this a small idea, just a little bit, branch it out, so to speak, right? For example, who is this guy, right? This guy is this, and that, right? For example, main character, maybe he's named Oliver, right? Lives in the US. Maybe this is a little bit more detailed, but this is like an idea, right? This is the main character, right? And then I'm going to move on to more action. So the settings, we have the main character, and we need to, for example, because this guy wants to be, is poor, right? So we need to have, to give a little bit more detail. So the main character is poor. So we need to describe the situation he lives in. For example, maybe his parents earn the minimum wage. Maybe he lives in very, very terrible place, maybe environment he lives in does not allow him to make more money. Maybe he doesn't, maybe he dropped out of school, right? There are a lot of ways we can describe or we can give this character the feel of poverty, right? Sometimes you don't need to say that he is poor. By describing the environment he lives in, you tell the reader that this guy is poor. There are two ways to show things. You can tell as a narrator, you can tell that, right, this guy is poor, and you can describe, or you can just describe the setting and people would know that this guy is poor, right? So back to the sequencing, right? So you need to sequence your event, right? So we said this guy is poor and he can't but he had a dream, a very good dream. He wants to go to Mars, right? It's a big one, but right. So as we move on, right, so we have this guy that again is poor, but he has a big dream, right? Maybe as he progressed, because he is so ambitious, maybe he starts maybe he goes to school, maybe he's dropped out of school, maybe he encounters somebody, and this someone maybe is gonna try to help. Maybe he talked about his dream, and this guy is gonna try to give him like a piece of advice, say, all right, to achieve your dream, you gotta do this and that, right? And maybe he's gonna follow on certain steps. So maybe we have here a first encounter with this guy, a conflict solver. Someone is gonna help him solve his problem, right? As he move on, he felt like I don't know, he probably got into school, a business school, and he made his own company, and his own startup. Everything turned out so well. But of course, not all stories are this way, right? So we have to find something that, like, a hurdle, right? Something that is gonna interrupt the event from their natural flow, right? So he got maybe his startup, right? He made so much money, but let's say he had another idea. He said, all right, um, so I feel like the amount of money I have is not enough. So I need maybe triple or quadruple the amount of money I have, right? So maybe then he's thought about spending money in stocks, right? So here we have another idea. So maybe somebody else introduced him to stocks, but it turned out that maybe all the money he earned, maybe he's going to lose it, right, in stocks, right? Or maybe he got into gambling, right? There are some ways we can make him lose that amount of money, right, in a very short time. And then we can go back to the natural flow. And then maybe he's going to start again. And now he knows the ropes, and, he knows how things should go, and he starts to make more money. And yeah, maybe eventually he is gonna go to Mars, right? Again, this is like a very simplistic way of thinking about it. Usually short stories take a little bit of time to develop, but you have to pay attention to the details, because details really, really matter in a short story, right? So this is a sequence of how a short story should be written. So write down the ideas of how you want your story to go. That is called the plot, right? You want this event to connect to this one. This person needs to do this, to do that, write this as an idea. Because when you are writing, essentially, your short story, you are going to be developing on those sentences you wrote in the plot. This thing happened here, and you can give them a little bit more description, right? So again, we're talking about this guy was poor or is poor, so we can describe his environment where he is poor, right? This guy met another person, we have to describe the encounter he met person, maybe while he was driving, or while he was maybe, I don't know, since we said he's poor, maybe he was begging, right? He met this guy and somehow accidentally told him about his dream. So we can create a scenario where this person, somehow found a way to get help, right? So again, once you have your plot, it's then you start to write. And once you start to write, you need to make those ideas shine. You need imagery, right? Symbols. You need figurative language, right? You can use irony. You can use metaphors, right? These are figurative language that are going to make your story shine. A story that is without figurative language is bland, right? It's like you're writing a scientific paper. It's just for information consumption. You don't necessarily enjoy the writing. To enjoy the writing process, you have to have, personification, irony, right? You can have allegories. You can have, anecdotes. You can have so many ways to make your story shine and enjoyable to read. Sometimes you write a short story, but people don't really like the short story because maybe of those factors. Now, so we laid out the grounds for how a short story or the process of a short story. So again, we said the plot, very important. First of all, you need to have the idea. Write the idea down, right? Very simple, right? Then develop that idea into plot sequencing. What happens first, second, third, next, or last, right? And then we need to start writing. Once we start writing, we need to make that writing shine by using language, figurative language. Very, very important, right? And then maybe overall, you can maybe link that to like a theme, right? Or a moral message. What do you think the reader is going to learn from reading your short story? Try to maybe like add certain hints. And of course, maybe you can link this to like a historical context, especially if you're writing something maybe like related to you. You can to like a historical time frame, for example, during the First World War, or during the Great Famine, right? So you can link this if you want to do that. Yes, if you don't want to do it, that's right. But if you can link them to like a bigger theme that people can at least link this together and learn something, that will be great. But yeah, this is how I usually go about writing short stories. If you like this process, and if you are willing to write short stories, I will try to help you as much as possible. And yeah, appreciate everybody for listening. I'll see you next time. Until then, bye.